Woman saves dying baby elephant. 14 years later, he returns and does the unthinkable. Years ago, a compassionate veterinarian saved the life of a dying baby elephant named Jabari. Little did she know, this act of kindness would spark an incredible story of trust, intelligence, and interspecies connection. 14 years later, Jabari returned to repay the favor in ways that defied imagination. Stay tuned for this inspiring journey that redefines the bond between humans and wildlife. Woman saved dying baby elephant's life. 14 years later, he returns and does something that made everyone cry. Dr. Sarah Mitchell hadn't planned on becoming known as the Elephant Whisperer of Kenya. 20 years ago, she'd been a promising veterinary student in London, more focused on small animal practice than megafauna. But a 3-month volunteer stint at the Amboseli Wildlife Sanctuary had changed everything. Now, at 45, her sun-weathered face and calloused hands told the story of 2 decades spent healing Africa's largest land mammals. The locals called her Mama Tembo, mother of elephants, though she'd never had children of her own. Her home, a modest research station on the outskirts of Amboseli National Park, housed more medical equipment than personal belongings. The walls were covered with X-rays of elephant injuries, behavioral charts, and most notably, hundreds of photographs documenting the elephants she treated over the years. She'd sacrificed a conventional life for this work, failed marriage to a fellow researcher who couldn't understand her dedication, missed family events back in England, and the comfort of a predictable career. But Sarah had found something more valuable: deep connection with creatures whose intelligence and emotional capacity continued to amaze her. Her most challenging case had come in 2010. A young bull elephant, barely 3 years old, caught in a poacher's wire snare. The injury had been severe, the infection worse, and most of her colleagues had advised euthanasia. But something in the young elephant's eyes had touched her soul. She'd named him Jabari, Swahili for brave, and spent 3 months nursing him back to health before releasing him into the wild. The sanctuary's current director, Dr. Benjamin Kamani, often joked that Sarah could read elephant minds. She had an uncanny ability to anticipate their behavior and respond to their needs. What no one knew was that during those long nights treating Jabari, something extraordinary had happened. A connection that defied scientific explanation. One that would become clear only years later. The morning of September 15th, 2024, began like any other at the sanctuary. Sarah was reviewing medical records when her radio crackled to life. Martin, one of the park rangers, was reporting unusual elephant behavior near the eastern boundary. "Dr. Mitchell, you need to see this." His voice carried an edge of concern. "There's a large bull elephant acting strangely. He's been standing by the fence for hours, just waiting. The herd moved on, but he stayed behind." Sarah grabbed her field kit and jumped into the sanctuary's weathered Land Rover. As she drove toward the eastern boundary, memories of Jabari flooded back. She'd released dozens of elephants over the years, but he had been different. During those 3 months of treatment, they developed a connection that her scientific mind still couldn't explain. Through her binoculars, she could see the elephant clearly. He was massive now, at least 12 feet tall, his tusks gleaming in the morning sun. But what struck her wasn't his size, it was his behavior. Most wild elephants showed caution around vehicles and human structures. This one stood calmly, deliberately facing the sanctuary's entrance. "How long has he been here?" she asked Martin over the radio. "Since dawn. He's scared away 3 tour vehicles, but he's not being aggressive. It's like he's waiting for something." As Sarah's vehicle approached, the elephant turned his head. Even from 50 yards away, she could see the distinctive scar on his left ear, the mark that had given her hope during Jabari's darkest days of recovery. Her hands began to tremble. On the steering wheel, the moment of recognition was instantaneous and mutual. The elephant, or Jabari, there was no doubt now, raised his trunk in a gesture Sarah had seen 1,000 times during his rehabilitation. It was their old greeting, a signal that had meant "I trust you" during those long nights of treatment. "It's impossible," Dr. Kamani said through the radio. He'd arrived at the observation post with a team of researchers. Wild elephants don't maintain human recognition for this long. The behavioral implications alone. But Sarah wasn't listening to the scientific objections. She was watching Jabari's movements with growing amazement. He was using his trunk to draw patterns in the dust, deliberate geometric shapes that made her heart stop. During his rehabilitation, she taught him to mirror simple shapes as a way to evaluate his cognitive recovery. Now he was recreating those exact patterns, but with a complexity that suggested years of mental development. Then she whispered into the radio, "Are you recording this?" The patterns weren't random. They were a sequence Sarah had used to track Jabari's healing progress: circle, triangle, square, circle. But he was adding new elements, creating a mathematical progression that shouldn't have been possible for any elephant to comprehend. Dr. Kamani's voice cracked with excitement. "Sarah, according to our database, this elephant matches the migration patterns of the herd we've been tracking. He's traveled over 1,000 kilometers to reach this exact spot. This isn't coincidence. This is intentional return." Sarah faced a choice that would challenge everything she'd been taught about wildlife conservation. Protocol dictated maintaining distance from wild elephants, especially bulls of Jabari's size. But every scientific instinct told her this was a unique opportunity to understand elephant cognition and emotional memory. "I'm going out there," she announced, ignoring the immediate protests from her colleagues. "He's not just demonstrating recognition. He's showing cognitive development we've never documented before." Consequences of her decision rippled through the sanctuary immediately. Research teams scrambled to set up observation equipment. News of an elephant demonstrating advanced cognitive patterns spread through the scientific community like wildfire. Within hours, the sanctuary's phones were ringing with calls from researchers worldwide. Sarah approached Jabari slowly, her heart pounding. As she drew closer, she could see more details that confirmed this was her former patient. Beyond the ear scar, there were subtle marks on his trunk, from the surgery she'd performed, and a distinctive notch in his left tusk that had helped her track his healing progress. Jabari watched her approach, his posture relaxed but alert. When she was within 20 feet, he did something that made the observing researchers gasp. He picked up a nearby branch and began to draw a new pattern, one that exactly matched the surgical scar on his leg. He was clearly communicating about their shared past. While Sarah and Jabari's reunion captured the world's attention, Dr. Kamani made another startling discovery. Reviewing years of tracking data, he found that Jabari's herd had been systematically visiting other rehabilitation sites across Kenya. Each visit corresponded with the presence of other elephants they had previously encountered in sanctuaries. Meanwhile, Dr. Emily Wong, cognitive specialist from Stanford University, arrived to study Jabari's extraordinary behavior. Her research team discovered that the geometric patterns he drew weren't just memories. They represented a complex form of communication. The shapes corresponded to specific events during his rehabilitation, suggesting a level of abstract thinking previously undocumented in elephants. More intriguingly, other elephants in Jabari's herd began showing similar behaviors. 2 younger females who had never been in rehabilitation were observed drawing simplified versions of his patterns in the dust. They were learning from him, developing a new form of elephant-to-human communication. Local Maasai elders came forward with stories passed down through generations about elephant teachers, special bulls who could bridge the gap between human and elephant understanding. What had been dismissed as folklore suddenly demanded serious scientific consideration. The sanctuary's research priorities shifted dramatically. Sarah and her team began documenting similar cases across Africa, discovering that other rehabilitated elephants had maintained long-term recognition of their caregivers. Pattern emerged. These elephants weren't just remembering. They were actively teaching their herds about positive human interactions. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's relationship with Jabari deepened in ways that challenged conventional wildlife science. Each morning, he would wait at the sanctuary's boundary, engaging in increasingly complex communication sessions. Dr. Wong's team documented over 50 distinct patterns in his drawings, each with specific contextual meanings. The bond between them became a bridge between two worlds. Through Jabari, Sarah began to understand elephant communication in entirely new ways. He would gesture towards specific members of his herd, then draw patterns that seemed to tell their stories. Young elephants would watch these exchanges with obvious interest, some attempting to mimic both Jabari's drawings and Sarah's responses. Dr. Kamani, initially skeptical, became one of their strongest advocates. "What we're seeing," he explained to visiting researchers, "isn't just animal intelligence. It's the development of a shared language, a deliberate attempt by both species to understand each other." The sanctuary's other elephants began responding differently to Sarah as well. Females with calves, normally protective and distant, would approach her when Jabari was present. He seemed to vouch for her, using specific trunk movements that the herd clearly understood. Most remarkably, Jabari began bringing injured elephants to the sanctuary's boundary. He would draw patterns indicating the type and location of injury, fundamentally changing how the sanctuary provided medical care to wild herds. Sarah found herself learning to read subtle variations in his communication, understanding not just what he was showing her, but the emotional context behind each message. Local community relationships transformed as well. Maasai warriors who had once seen elephants as potential threats began working with the sanctuary, sharing their traditional knowledge about elephant behavior. They recognized in Jabari's actions the stories their grandparents had told about elephants who acted as mediators between the human and animal worlds. The defining moment came during the worst drought Kenya had seen in decades. Jabari arrived at the sanctuary one morning in visible distress, drawing patterns with an urgency Sarah had never seen. Through their developed communication system, he indicated something was wrong with his herd, far beyond the sanctuary's boundaries. Dr. Wong's team quickly decoded his patterns. He was describing a group of elephants, including several calves trapped in a dried-out riverbed 20 miles south. The drought had created deep mud pits where the river once flowed, and the herd had become stuck while searching for water. Sarah faced a crucial decision. Following Jabari into unprotected territory went against every safety protocol, but the urgency of his communication was unmistakable. Within an hour, she had assembled a rescue team, including veterinarians, researchers, and Maasai guides. What they discovered exceeded their worst fears. 15 elephants, including 4 calves, were trapped in hardening mud, too weak from dehydration to free themselves. But what happened next astonished even the most experienced researchers. Jabari took charge of the rescue operation, showing an understanding of physics that challenged everything they knew about elephant intelligence. He demonstrated to the rescue team where to position their vehicles for leverage, used his trunk to indicate the safest paths through the mud, and even showed them which elephants needed immediate medical attention. Most incredibly, he worked with the sanctuary's rescue equipment as if he understood its purpose, using his strength in coordination with the winches and ropes. The rescue operation attracted international media attention, and with it came controversy. Traditional wildlife conservation experts argued that allowing such close interaction between humans and wild elephants set a dangerous precedent. Some even called for Sarah's credentials to be reviewed, claiming she was anthropomorphizing Jabari's behavior. The debate reached a critical point when the International Wildlife Conservation Board announced an emergency review of the sanctuary's practices. Dr. Kamani and Sarah faced a panel of experts in Nairobi, armed with months of documented evidence of Jabari's extraordinary capabilities. "What we're witnessing isn't just learned behavior," Sarah argued, presenting videos of Jabari's geometric communications. "This is deliberate, sophisticated intelligence. He's not just remembering his rehabilitation. He's built upon that experience to create new ways of bridging our species." The turning point came when Dr. Wong presented her analysis of Jabari's communication patterns. Using AI-assisted pattern recognition, her team had documented over 200 distinct symbols in his drawings, each with consistent meaning across multiple contexts. The mathematical probability of this being random behavior was essentially zero. But the most compelling evidence came from the field. During the panel's deliberations, reports arrived of similar behavior from rehabilitated elephants across Africa. In Uganda, a former orphan elephant had led rangers to poachers' snares. In Tanzania, another had shown signs of teaching younger elephants about safe human interactions. The sanctuary's Maasai partners provided crucial testimony about their generations of elephant knowledge. Their traditional understanding of elephant intelligence, long dismissed by Western science, was finally being validated by modern research methods. Dr. Kamani proposed a revolutionary new approach to wildlife conservation, a cooperative model that recognized elephants as active participants in their own protection. "We're not just sharing territory with these animals," he explained. "We're sharing knowledge, sharing communication, sharing responsibility for survival." The panel's final decision transformed wildlife conservation policy. The sanctuary was designated as a center for interspecies communication research, with Sarah and Dr. Wong leading a new field of study they called cooperative conservation. Jabari's herd became the first elephant group officially recognized as partners in wildlife protection efforts. A year after the mud pit rescue, the Amboseli Sanctuary had transformed into the International Center for Elephant Communication Studies. What began as a reunion between a veterinarian and her former patient had sparked a revolution in how humans interact with wildlife. Bari's role evolved from patient to teacher. He began regularly bringing different members of his herd to the sanctuary's learning area, a special zone designed for safe elephant-human interaction. Young elephants would practice drawing patterns under his guidance, while researchers documented the development of this new form of communication. The most significant breakthrough came when Jabari began teaching other bulls from different herds. These elephants would travel considerable distances to spend time at the sanctuary, learning his communication methods before returning to their own herds to share this knowledge. A network of elephant-to-human communication sites started emerging across East Africa. Sarah's understanding of elephant intelligence deepened beyond anything she'd imagined possible. "We didn't just save Jabari's life years ago," she often told new researchers. "We gave him the tools to build a bridge between our species. He chose to use those tools not just for himself, but for the benefit of both elephants and humans." The transformation in Sarah's life and work was profound. From a dedicated but conventional wildlife veterinarian, she had become a pioneer in a new field of study. Her daily interactions with Jabari and his herd challenged everything she thought she knew about animal consciousness and intelligence. Looking back, she wrote in her journal, "I realized that while I was treating Jabari's physical wounds all those years ago, he was studying us just as intently. He didn't just recover, he learned, adapted, and eventually found a way to teach others what he had learned." The local Maasai community's relationship with the elephants underwent its own evolution. Young warriors who once proved their bravery by confronting elephants now trained as communication interpreters, working with both species to prevent conflict and protect shared resources. Their traditional knowledge, combined with new scientific understanding, created a powerful model for conservation. Dr. Wong's research revealed that the elephant's capacity for abstract thinking far exceeded previous estimates. The geometric patterns they used weren't just symbols, they were elements of a growing language that incorporated spatial relationships, temporal concepts, and even emotional states. Each new generation of elephants added to this vocabulary, creating an ever more sophisticated means of interspecies dialogue. Sarah found herself learning as much as she taught. The elephants showed her new ways of understanding their ecosystem, leading her to water sources she hadn't known existed, and helping predict weather patterns through their behavior. "They're not just sharing information," she observed. "They're sharing wisdom." The story of Sarah and Jabari became a symbol of hope in conservation circles worldwide. Their reunion had opened the door to understanding that true wildlife conservation wasn't about humans protecting animals. It was about species working together to protect shared environments. Jabari continued his regular visits to the sanctuary, each time bringing new insights and teaching new skills to both elephants and humans. The young bull she had saved had become a teacher, a bridge builder, and a reminder that intelligence and consciousness know no species boundaries. As Sarah watched him work with a group of young elephants one evening, teaching them to communicate with the newest group of researchers, she reflected on how a simple act of compassion had grown into something that changed both their worlds. The true miracle wasn't just that Jabari had remembered her, it was that he had chosen to use that memory to build something entirely new. Sometimes, she told her students, the most incredible scientific discoveries don't come from our questions or our research. They come from being open to learning from those we thought we were meant to teach. This story of Sarah and Jabari reminds us of the profound connections we can share with the natural world. Jabari's remarkable actions teach us that intelligence, compassion, and cooperation extend beyond species boundaries. It's a beautiful example of how a single act of kindness can grow into a legacy that bridges gaps and transforms lives. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales.